The moving truck idled in the cul-de-sac while Karen Whitmore, HOA president, stood on the porch waving a stack of papers like a victory flag. "You have 30 minutes, Mr. Carter," she sneered. The board voted. "You're in violation of 17 covenants. The house is now association property until fines are paid." I'd been living in Grandpa's colonial in Fairfax, Virginia for 6 weeks, ever since his funeral. The place still smelled like his old spice and pipe tobacco. I was on terminal leave from Camp Lejeune, figuring out civilian life after 12 years in the Marine Corps. I hadn't even unpacked my sea bag. Karen's minions, 2 retired accountants and a woman who introduced herself only as Treasurer Brenda, started boxing my uniforms. My grandfather's Purple Heart clattered into a plastic bin. "Those fines are from 2019, I said, voice calm. "Grandpa was in the VA hospital. Statute of limitations. Doesn't apply to HOA assessments," Karen cut in, smiling like she'd rehearsed it. "Pay $47,312.84 today or we change the locks." I looked at the house where I learned to ride a bike, where Grandpa taught me to salute properly. Then I looked at the eviction notice. They'd filed it ex parte, no hearing, no notice to me as heir. In Virginia, that's cute. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and asked Karen to repeat herself for the camera. She posed, thinking it was TikTok fame. That was Monday. By Wednesday, they'd sold Grandpa's 1972 Chevelle at auction for storage fees. By Friday, the locks were changed and a new family was touring the place. I slept in my truck outside the gate that night. At 0200, I opened my laptop, logged into the JAG portal still active from my terminal leave, and started writing emails with subject lines no HOA wants to see. I wasn't just some grandson. I was Major Alexander J. Carter, Judge Advocate, United States Marine Corps. And they'd just committed about 19 federal and state crimes on a military officer's primary residence. At 0600 Tuesday, I walked into the Fairfax County Courthouse wearing my service alphas, ribbons, no cover, just to remind everyone this was official. The clerk's eyes widened when I slid across a 43-page complaint titled Carter v. Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, et al. Violations, FDCPA, SCRA, Virginia Consumer Protection Act, quiet title, slander of title, trespass to chattels, conversion and civil RICO. I'd filed it pro se the night before. Filing fee waived, active duty military courtesy. By 0900, the clerk had already called the HOA's registered agent. Karen picked up herself. "Ma'am, you've been served with a federal lawsuit and a notice of lis pendens. The house can't be sold or transferred until this is resolved." She laughed until the clerk read the damages line. 2.4 million plus punitive. At 1100, I was in Richmond at JAG headquarters. My old CO, Colonel Reyes, read the complaint and whistled. "Alex, you sure you want to go nuclear? I can make one phone call and they'll fold." "Negative, sir. I want them to feel every round." He grinned. "Then take the whole battery." By 1500, I had a letter from Marine Corps Installations. Command reminding the HOA that the Service Members Civil Relief Act caps interest at 6% and forbids foreclosure without court order. While I was on active orders, my terminal leave still counted. A criminal referral to the Virginia Attorney General for theft of a classic vehicle owned by a protected veteran's estate. A demand letter on official JAG letterhead to Wells Fargo, the HOA's bank, freezing their operating account pending discovery of commingled funds. That night, Karen tried to rally the board on Nextdoor. Someone leaked the complaint. Comments went from "get that squatter out" to "they evicted a JAG officer? We're screwed." I sat in a hotel off I-95 eating MRE crackers, watching the Facebook group implode. One neighbor posted a photo of Karen's McMansion with the caption, "Hope your Christmas lights meet covenant standards when the marshal comes." At 2200, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Major Carter, this is Special Agent Morris, NCIS. We're opening a case on possible theft of military decorations. Your grandfather's Purple Heart. Mind if we stop by tomorrow?" I smiled in the dark. "Bring coffee, Agent Morris. It's going to be a long week for Oak Ridge Estates." 3 weeks later, Judge Angela Park, a former Army JAG herself, called the case. Karen strutted in with a $700 an hour attorney from Tyson's Corner. I wore service dress blues, saber scar on my left hand, still pink from Fallujah. The lawyer tried the usual HOA playbook. Your Honor, the plaintiff waived SCRA protections by not registering the property as his primary residence. I slid across a single sheet, my approved terminal leave address change form, dated the day Grandpa died, listing the house as my legal domicile. Judge Park's eyebrow went up. Counsel, are you suggesting the Marine Corps lied to the Defense Manpower Data Center? Silence. Then came the fun part. I called my first witness, Treasurer Brenda, under subpoena. Ma'am, did the board vote to sell Mr. Carter's 1972 Chevelle for $800? Yes, but was the vehicle titled in his name as sole heir? Yes. And did you personally sign the auction slip 2 days after receiving the list pendants? She looked at Karen. Karen looked at the floor. Judge Park didn't even wait for closing arguments. Summary judgment for the plaintiff on all counts. Treble damages under the Virginia Consumer Protection Act. Statutory damages under SCRA. Return of the residents within 48 hours. And Ms. Whitmore, you and the board are jointly and severally liable. I'm also referring this matter to the U.S. Attorney for possible federal criminal violations. Karen stood up, voice shaking. Your Honor, we didn't know he was military. Judge Park stared over her glasses. That's the problem, ma'am. You didn't care who he was. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Someone had leaked that the HOA's insurance carrier just excluded coverage for acts of intentional misconduct. Translation. Karen and the board were personally on the hook for $2.4 million. As I walked to my truck, my phone buzzed. Colonel Reyes. Alex, the commandant just saw the Stars and Stripes article. Wants you to consider staying in. Says we need more officers who can make grown civilians cry in open court. I laughed for the first time in months. Respectfully, sir, I've got a house to repaint. Grandpa hated eggshell white anyway. That night, the locks were changed back. I carried Grandpa's Purple Heart inside and hung it where it belonged. Karen's house went into foreclosure 6 weeks later. Rumor is she answers phones at a call center now. 6 months later, on a Saturday that smelled like fresh-cut grass and karma, Oak Ridge Estates held its emergency annual meeting in the clubhouse. Every chair was full. Half the residents wore red USMC t-shirts someone had printed overnight. Protected by Major Carter. I walked in wearing jeans and Grandpa's old VFW cap. No uniform today? This was personal. The agenda had only one item. Dissolution of the current HOA and election of a new board. Karen wasn't there. She'd moved to a studio apartment in Woodbridge after the judgment wiped out her savings. Brenda had taken early retirement and left the state. The remaining old guard board members sat in the back row looking like they'd aged 10 years. A retired Navy chief stood up first. I move we dissolve the existing association and reform under new bylaws written by Major Carter. Seconded before he finished the sentence. I took the microphone. Grandpa always said an HOA should protect property values, not destroy families. Here's the deal. I passed out the new covenants, single-spaced, 2 pages total. No architectural review committee. Paint your house purple if you want. No fining for unmowed lawns during deployment or medical leave. All fines over $50 require unanimous board vote and 30-day cure period. Any board member who personally profits from a fine is removed and banned for life. 1 mandatory potluck barbecue every Memorial Day. Veterans eat free. The vote was 112-3. The 3 holdouts were the people who'd helped Karen carry my boxes that first day. They moved out before fall. I never ran for the new board. Instead, I became the unpaid parliamentarian. The guy you call when someone gets stupid again. The first barbecue was epic. 3 grills, 2 kegs, and a color guard of local vets. Grandpa's Purple Heart sat on the dessert table in a place of honor. Kids saluted it for extra cookies. A year later, property values in Oak Ridge Estates rose 28%. Turns out people like living where the HOA fears the residents instead of the other way around. I still live in Grandpa's house. The Chevelle is back in the garage, restored Marine Corps green. On quiet nights, I sit on the porch he built, drinking coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe, and watch new neighbors wave instead of glare. Sometimes freedom isn't about saluting a flag. Sometimes it's about making sure no little tyrant in a visor ever again tells a grieving grandson he doesn't belong in the only home he has left. Semper Fi, Grandpa. House is still ours.